I am so intrigued. Now that we're gaining a new level of lucidity, we have awareness of some of the stuff that was happening last year we didn't have awareness before. And so last year, there was all of these things happening and we couldn't articulate the sensational experiences. One of the most fascinating things is how there was a loss of continuity between unfolding moments. And in that experience, a loss of the neurobiological ability of consciousness to sustain an awareness of what existed beyond the present moment. And this was indescribably terrifying. And there was no way to articulate these experiences because they were occurring in a totally separate area of my consciousness from my language centers. And so, like, one example would be coming to chiropractor, which is where I am right now. Dr. Luka Music, amazing miracle worker. And so we'd be coming to chiropractor. I know, we got our stuffed elephants. They've got a better memory than we do. Explicitly, anyway. Our implicit memory remembers everything. But we would come to Cairo, and leaving the house, there was no knowing, no sense of knowing that we'd be returning, because when we would return, we wouldn't have access to the piece of memory or the piece of consciousness or the piece of awareness from that moment of leaving the house. There is no continuity. There is no continuation within my stream of consciousness, within my unfolding applications of working memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, any of it. Not with conscious access anyways. I don't know what was going on. We're still working to understand our memory struggles. But we would come to Cairo, and in that time period of driving, every stimulus change would cause a shift of consciousness, and the memory would be completely disrupted, interrupted, shattered, torn apart, refreshed, started anew with no understanding of what was previously occurring. And so preparing to leave the house would be one thing. Once we get in the car and start driving away, that's another thing. Turning onto the street, going down the road, that's another thing. Going at the stop sign and then turning down another road, that's another thing. And all of these little one things were separate experiences that had zero relationship with one another. Zero relationship with one another. Yeah, I don't go. I love when I'm seen. It's the happiest Ota today. Happiest Ota today. So, no continuity. And when there's no continuity of self and no continuity of unfolding life experience, it feels like there's nothing within the mind, within the operating mind, within the self operating within the mind. There's just no continuity. And if there's no flow, there's no actual experience. Because the way humans tend to experience life is through an explicit interpretation. And so as I'm sitting here, the implicit sensation would be, I feel my butt on the brick. I feel my back on the wall. I feel a breeze on my skin. I feel my mouth moving. I feel my eyes blinking. I feel a twitch in my skin as there's an itch, and I feel the sensational impulse to scratch the itch, and I feel my hand moving, and I feel my hand scratching, and I feel that there's things in my lap where there's a slight sense of pressure on my chest area, and I can feel that my knees are bent, and I can feel that there's an environment around me. I can feel that there's a thing there, a thing there, a thing there, a thing there. I can feel that there's a door there, a door there. I can feel that there's a thing there. I can feel that there's a thing there. I can feel that there's a thing there. I can feel that things are there. There's all these different implicit sensations, but that's not how people tend to experience life. We're not sitting here noticing all of these individual implicit things explicitly. Instead, the explicit sensation is, I'm a person sitting in a place. And that's it. And so without the explicit interpretation of experience, and only the implicit sensations that have no continuity with one another, and no explicit description, and no sense of self to observe in a way that the observations have some kind of similarities with one another. There's no sense of self that has continuity within the observational experience of the implicit sensations. It can feel really scary. It can feel a tad crazy. It can feel a tad insane. And I use that word with quotations because words like insanity and craziness, maniacalness, I don't know if that's a word, shifting in the conjugation of maniac or mania, maniacal. These words are used so casually and so carelessly within society. And we as like the human population, we tend to use words based on connotations rather than annotations. We tend to use words based on the way they feel to us rather than by their dictionary definition of actual meaning. And quite frankly, this is a pretty scary place to be. Because if we're using words based on their feelings and not their meanings, then the words lose their meanings and the language loses its power. And language holds a lot of power. Like, this is just like a thing that's quite clear all throughout history and all throughout different societies worldwide. When people have language, they have more power. Missionaries within churches, as one of many examples, go to other countries and teach kids how to read, because you're not just teaching a kid how to read. You're building their cognitive abilities and growing their personal power for the rest of their life. That's a big deal. Part of the important aspect of evolution of humankind was the accessibility of language. When we go around, can we understand each other? No, cavemen evolved. And writings on walls became articulated letters, and things evolved. Language evolved. Language is important. Language has a lot of power. You're a little buzzing creature. Language has a lot of power. And so if we're using language carelessly and forfeiting the power of its actual meanings, where the things that one person says and the same words used by another person don't mean the same things, that's a society that's crumbling in its core. And this society shouldn't be crumbling. We have every opportunity, every advantage, and all of the thousands of years of existence of the human species, we have more opportunities and advantages than ever before. Our evolution it's skyrocketing. We don't need to be crumbling. And if we are, we need to be aware of this and reclaim that power to prevent a total collapse. And this is where the Take Back Crazy campaign comes in with the dissociative identity movement. Mental health terminology is one of many, many examples of how language is used carelessly, and it causes pain. Like, it's not just causing a misinterpretation between people. It's not just causing a few small miscommunications or errors in clarity. It's causing pain. Humans are suffering and experiencing unnecessary pain because of the way language is being carelessly used. A few examples are insane or insanity, crazy, craziness, trauma or traumatic, OCD. There's a whole variety. Lunatic, maniac. What do these words actually mean? And how mindful are we of their applications? Because if I say to somebody, I just experienced trauma, and it's actual trauma that rewired my neurobiological brain, disrupted the energetic flows within my bodily nervous system, caused permanent shifts that I can rewire, but they're lasting, long-lasting shifts in my internal health to the deepest core imaginable. And someone else is using it very casually just to mean stressful or painful or rough. They're not going to believe me when I say it was traumatic. And their response will invalidate my pain. And I'm speaking from experience. It was one of the hardest things. Quite frankly, it was just as hard as suffering the trauma. Having it invalidated because people weren't using their words accurately. Like, no, I'm not just saying there was pain and it was a tough day. I'm saying the neurobiological core of my consciousness has shifted to a deeply dark place that I'm trapped in because of this event. Those are very different things. It is not traumatic to fail a test at school. And if we're using the word traumatic in such a casual way, then when people suffer real trauma and describe it as such, that language is not going to be accurately communicated. And there will be unnecessary pain caused. OCD is another great example. When we use it carelessly and casually, oh, someone's really organized, therefore I describe them as someone with OCD. That's not an effective, accurate application of that term. And when it's used so casually and carelessly, people actually struggling with OCD, people actually suffering because of the neurobiological applications of consciousness related to OCD, their whole world is invalidated. Language is power, and we need to be responsible with our power.